Welcome to The Deep Dive, the show where we take your sources, peel back the layers, and unearth those surprising nuggets of knowledge that help you become truly well-informed. Today, we're embarking on a fascinating journey through centuries of history, exploring the resilient tapestry of Christianity in a specific, often turbulent region of India, the historical land of Canara, located on the country's southwestern coast.
Indeed, our focus today is a historical manuscript, a history of the Diocese of Mangalore, which chronicles the profound origins and remarkable story of its Christian people. This isn't just an overview, we're delving into a narrative that spans from the earliest, most uncertain introductions of Christianity right up to the early 20th century. It's a compelling tale of unwavering faith, astonishing perseverance, and profound societal change in the face of really immense challenges.
Our mission today is to extract the most pivotal moments, the surprising turns, and the enduring legacies from this rich historical account. You'll hear about the enigmatic whispers of early missionaries, the profound impact of major geopolitical shifts, the devastating experience of persecutions that brought the community, well, right to the brink, and the incredible, inspiring rebuilding efforts that ultimately defined its enduring spirit. So let's unpack this. 1. Seeds in the soil. Early Christianity in Canara, before 1500. Our deep dive begins with what feels like a fascinating historical mystery. How and when did Christianity first arrive in Canara? Our sources make it clear that it's incredibly difficult to pinpoint an exact moment or specific founding figure for this particular region. However, the broader picture for Christianity's presence in India as a whole is surprisingly ancient and quite clear.
That's right. The faith was introduced into India at a very, very early date, possibly even in the first centuries of the Christian era. Think about that for a moment. This isn't centuries after the fact. It's potentially not long after the apostles themselves walked the earth. It really makes it one of the earliest Christian communities outside the Middle East.
And part of that early picture involves the Syrian Christians, right? Down in the
Good.
south.
Exactly. What's crucial to understand here is the long, well-documented history of the Syrian Christians in southern India. They possess a strong tradition dating back centuries, claiming St. Thomas, one of Jesus' original 12 apostles, as their founder. Now, given their deeply rooted establishment in the South, it's far from improbable that some knowledge of Christianity, maybe carried by traders or informal networks, would have gradually spread northward along the West Coast.
So potentially reaching areas like Kanara even then.
Potentially, yes. It could have touched and influenced areas like Canara. Furthermore, we know from meticulous historical records that from the time of Emperor Augustus all the way to the fall of the Roman Empire, a Roman fleet sailed yearly to India. They engaged in robust and consistent trade along its western seaboard.
Right, that constant contact.
Constant contact. And when you combine this regular commercial interaction with the fervent zeal of the primitive church, which, as we know, was eager to spread the message to the furthest corners of the known world, well, it becomes a safe and logical conclusion that the very first seeds of Christianity were likely sown in India incredibly close to the apostolic times.
So while the broader Indian context points to these incredibly ancient roots, what about Canara specifically? Does our history provide any more concrete evidence of those initial seeds actually taking root there? Or is it largely inference for this precise location?
And this is precisely where the fascinating uncertainty lies. It really highlights the challenges, inherent in piecing together ancient history from limited records. We do read of a Christian bishop at a place called Kalyanpur in the 6th century. That sounds promising, right?
Definitely.
But the source immediately raises a critical point of historical ambiguity. There were actually 3 cities of that name. One in particular was a far more significant Kalyanpur, the powerful capital of the Kalachuri state, located way up in the Thana district of the Bombay Presidency, far to the north.
So not necessarily our Kalyanpur in South Canara.
Exactly. The conclusion that this bishop's see was definitively in South Canara doesn't necessarily follow. This kind of geographical ambiguity is a common hurdle for historians. Later, we know that Franciscans, Dominicans, and other religious orders were actively preaching the faith elsewhere in India. Yet, curiously, Canara isn't specifically mentioned as one of their direct primary mission fields during those periods.
So what does that paint a picture of? A more scattered presence?
It paints a picture of a scattered, perhaps largely undocumented, early Christian presence in Canara. One that certainly wasn't easily traceable to a specific event or individual. It suggests a more organic, perhaps even almost clandestine early growth.
That makes it feel almost mystical, doesn't it? A faith arriving not with a grand fanfare, but maybe through quiet, unrecorded movements, carried by individuals rather than big institutions. And the source even provides this captivating, almost folkloric anecdote from 1493 that hints at this unique pre-Portuguese Christian presence. It sounds almost too good to be true.
It's a truly captivating story, isn't it? Almost like something out of an old epic or a local legend, but it's presented in the Oriente Conquistado as a historical account. Okay, so the narrative goes like this. In 1493, fishermen went out one evening to cast their nets. Standard practice. The next day, when they drew them ashore, they found not a single fish. Just frustrating. But they did find a wooden cross tangled in the nets.
A cross, just like that.
Just like that. Now, at that time, they knew nothing of the cross's significance or its spiritual virtue. But then, an extraordinary phenomenon occurred. They observed the sea literally effervescing with fish all around the precise spot where they had found the cross.
Wow, seriously.
That's the account. Naturally, they cast their nets again, and this time they had an abundantly successful catch. Makes you think, right? Later, this same wooden cross mysteriously reappears in the treasury of a local prince. When a Portuguese visitor is shown the prince's treasures, he immediately recognizes and venerates the cross, begging the prince to give it to him.
And the prince?
Initially reluctant, apparently viewing it as a cherished family heirloom. But eventually he parts with it in exchange for some other article. Now, the author of our source uses this account to speculate that an Armenian navigator must have traversed the coast before the Portuguese, carrying such a cross. It powerfully suggests a unique, potentially non-European, pre-Portuguese Christian presence, independent of the later European missions.
That's fascinating. A whole different strand of history, possibly.
Exactly. It's a wonderful example of how profound historical truths can emerge from unexpected places, forcing us to consider possibilities beyond the officially documented narrative, and how folklore sometimes can hold these grains of historical reality.
So for Canara, it's not a clear-cut founding moment, like, say, the arrival of a specific saint we can point to. It's more like hints of an ancient, almost mystical connection to a faith that was clearly present elsewhere in India. It reminds us that history is often built on fragments and traditions, whispered tales, archaeological oddities, rather than straightforward records. It's a testament, really, to the enduring nature of belief, even when its origins are shrouded in time. 2. The Age of Empires and Evangelists. Portuguese influence and early missions, 1500 to 1677. Okay, so that sets the scene. Then the Portuguese arrive and things change dramatically. This marks a new, far more documented and, let's say, more assertive era for Christianity in India, and specifically in Canara. Our sources introduce us to Father Pedro de Cabiones, who came as chaplain with Vasco da Gama in 1498. He's noted for prophesying the arrival of the famous St. Francis Xavier, but his own missionary career was tragically short.
Very short, yes. He was martyred in Calicut on July 31st, 1498. A swift but impactful end to his work, and maybe a sign of the danger to come. But this was just the very beginning of European efforts to establish an organized church presence along India's coast.
Others followed quickly, though.
Oh, yes. His martyrdom, though swift, seemed to underscore the dangers, but it didn't deter others. Many Franciscans and other friars followed, driven by zealous missionary fervor. Some, like 3 Franciscans in the year 1500, also met martyrs' deaths in Calicut for their preaching. A few years later, Pope Alexander VI got directly involved, sending Fra Duarte Núñez, a Dominican, and 12 more missionaries to Cochin. It's highly probable their work extended north along the coast from there, gradually laying more groundwork.
But the real turning point was Goa, wasn't it?
Absolutely. The conquest of Goa by Afonso de Albuquerque in 1510. That was the game changer. This pivotal event transformed Goa into not only the political, but also the supreme religious center of Portuguese India. And Fra Duarte Núñez, that same Dominican missionary, was consecrated bishop and sent to Goa as vicar apostolic in 1514. That formally established a powerful, permanent ecclesiastical seat from which the church's reach could really extend.
And this growing Portuguese presence radiating out from Goa led to the building of actual physical churches in Canara itself, a sign of a more entrenched community.
Exactly, a more visible Christian community. The source explicitly states that Cananor, a significant Portuguese outpost, was evangelized by Fathers Martin, Estevio, and John. Their commitment was such that they even built a church within the fort of San Angelo using materials brought all the way from Europe. That's significant.
A real statement of permanence.
It was. And Mangalore itself, our specific focus region, saw a regular mission established in 1526 by Franciscans coming directly from Goa. This led to the rapid construction of 3 specific churches that would become foundational. Our Lady of the Rosary, Our Lady of Mercy, and St. Francis. And importantly, the source notes these churches were still standing in 1623 when the Italian traveler Pietro della Valle visited. This shows a growing, established Christian footprint, surviving even some early setbacks like Mangalore temporarily falling to another ruler before being retaken.
Okay, now what about the famous St. Francis Xavier? He's such a towering figure in the story of Christianity in India, often credited with widespread conversions. Was he the big converter in Canara, as some traditions might suggest? This is where you said it gets really interesting.
Yes, this is a prime example of historical myth versus documented fact, and it's a crucial distinction the source makes quite forcefully. St. Francis Xavier arrived in Goa in 1543. Immensely important figure, no doubt. However, the sources explicitly state that his primary ministry was among the Portuguese residents and the existing Christians already present there, not among the non-Christian populations or pagans of the region.
So the tradition about him converting the ancestors of South Camaro Catholics
Is explicitly stated by this history to be without a basis of truth. We have no concrete evidence that he ever visited Camara beyond being at Cananore for just a few hours. The source even cites details from his life, noting he merely heard a confession at a palm grove there before moving on.
Wow.
Furthermore, and this is highly significant, the wholesale conversions of pagans in Goa, the really massive influx into Christianity, actually took place after his death, driven by others, particularly the Jesuits. This challenges that long-held perception and really highlights the true, often unsung heroes of conversion, those dedicated early Franciscans and later Jesuits, whose names might be less known globally, but whose local impact was profound.
It's fascinating how enduring these historical myths can be, even when the documentation tells a different story. What does it tell us about how communities remember figures? Maybe a tendency to attribute big things to already famous people.
I think that's a crucial observation. It speaks to the human need for a clear foundational narrative, a recognizable hero. St. Francis Xavier was undeniably a giant of the missions. Charismatic, tireless, his influence was vast. It's natural for communities to associate their origins with such a revered figure, even if the direct historical links aren't quite there. It often simplifies a complex process involving many people over many years into a single, more digestible story. For historians, it underscores the importance of critical source analysis, distinguishing between tradition, which serves vital cultural functions, and documented historical fact. The reality is often messier, more diffuse, involving many unsung heroes.
Right, so if not St. Francis Xavier personally converting large numbers in Canara, then who did convert the Christians there, and how did this community actually grow to become so established?
Well, the early Franciscan missionaries certainly played a key role wherever the Portuguese established footholds. They formed the initial nuclei in places like Mangalore and Cananore. But a far more significant factor, the source reveals, was a substantial wave of migration. Native Christians from Goa territory, especially Konkani Christians, flocked into Canara in great numbers.
Why Canara specifically?
This happened particularly when Canara was under the rule of the Vijayanagar Empire and later the Bednar Kingdom. The rulers of these states actively welcomed and granted many privileges to these Christian communities. Why? Because they highly value them as skilled agriculturists.
Ah, economic value.
Exactly. Imagine a community with valuable farming expertise being offered incentives and security to relocate. It's a strong pull. Moreover, in the second half of the 17th century, the marauder raids in Goanese territory caused immense distress, famine, instability, even in Goa itself. This drove many more Konkani Christians to seek refuge in new lives in the more stable Canara region. So a dual pull of opportunity and push of hardship.
That makes perfect sense. People seeking opportunity or fleeing hardship, a timeless pattern. But the sources also mention some rather unusual, almost absurd theories that circulated about where these Konkani Christians came from. Sounds like some confusion or maybe prejudice?
Yes, and the source is quite emphatic in refuting them, highlighting how far-fetched they were. Really quite strange. One particularly outlandish theory was that St. Francis Xavier, in an effort to remove occasions of sin for Portuguese soldiers, sent Konkani concubines from Goa to Canara. Just bizarre.
Good grief.
Another equally strange theory suggested that convicts from the Bijapur state were sent first to Goa and then on to Canara, like a penal colony, a sort of Botany Bay. The source dismisses these vehemently, stating it would be just as ridiculous to assert that the citizens of the new Commonwealth of Australia are descendants of Sydney Ducks as to maintain that our Christians are the offspring of people who left for their country's good. These theories, however outlandish, probably tell us something about the anxieties or biases of the time regarding a new migrating community.
How to explain this influx?
Right. The source strongly asserts The vast majority were genuine descendants of Konkans, converted by Jesuits, and others in Goa, Salsette, and other districts. This emphasizes their deep roots and authentic conversions, driven by faith and economic opportunity, not some kind of social rejects.
And central to these genuine conversions and the broader development was a significant institution in Goa.
Absolutely. The College of Santa Fe in Goa, founded in 1541, truly crucial to the whole enterprise. It served as a primary training ground for the missionaries who converted many of these ancestors and who later worked for their good in Canara itself. St. Francis Xavier himself, writing enthusiastically from Goa in October 1543, called it a work of greater need in India, emphasizing its importance. He highlighted it was strongly supported by the governor and intended to produce native priests, interpreters, catechists, specifically for the missions.
And symbolically funded, too.
Quite symbolically, yes. It was originally endowed with funds that had previously maintained pagan priests, a direct, deliberate shift of resources and focus, a strategic investment in the future of the church in India.
Speaking of conversion, the source provides a detailed and frankly somewhat intense account of the conversion of Salsette near Goa. This sounds like a more direct, perhaps less gentle process than the migration we discussed.
It was indeed very direct and, at times, coercive. In 1560, Jesuits were specifically sent to Salsette. Within a remarkable 50 years, all 67 villages in the region had become Christian. That's fast. However, this process was met with great opposition from the existing Hindu population, particularly because of the systematic destruction of pagodas, Hindu temples, by order or permission of the Portuguese government.
That's bound to cause opposition.
Absolutely. This deliberate policy led to serious incidents, including the savage slaughter of Blessed Rudolph Aquaviva and 4 companions at Kunkulam in 1583. A brutal event, a stark reminder of the forceful imposition that often accompanied colonial expansion. The author of the history, trying to contextualize this, explains it must be judged by the standard of the period. To 16th century Catholics, permitting idolatry in a Christian-ruled state was deemed unlawful, an offense against natural law and the true faith.
So even if forced conversion wasn't seen as true conversion.
Right. But the sensuous rites of popular Hindu worship were deemed necessary to be suppressed by law, similar perhaps to how sati was later suppressed by the British for different reasons. Faced with this intense pressure, many Hindus chose emigration to South Canara over conversion, further adding to the population mix there. It shows a complex interplay of coercion, resistance, and migration. It certainly provides an important, albeit challenging, historical lens. Understanding the motivations and actions of the time reveals that difficult ethical landscape of early modern religious expansion.
So, the Portuguese era was clearly a complex mix. Zealous missionary work, strategic geopolitical moves, and often quite coercive measures, resulting in both genuine conversions driven by faith and opportunity and forced displacements. A fascinating, if sometimes troubling, Chapter 3, Turbid Waters, Challenges and Transitions, mid-1600s, late 1700s. The vibrant, if sometimes forceful period of Portuguese expansion eventually faced decline, as empires tend to do. What were the consequences for the Christian community in Canara as Portuguese power waned and new rivals emerged?
Well, as Portuguese power diminished, facing formidable rivals like the Dutch and increasingly hostile Marathas expanding across the subcontinent, the protection and support they could offer diminished significantly. As a direct consequence, missionaries were recalled from dangerous posts. Canara found itself facing a period of great spiritual destitution due to a severe, alarming lack of priests.
A real scarcity.
The source notes that only churches in Mangalore, Honore, and Barcelona were even mentioned as still existing at this time, and even these lacked permanent clergy. This meant the faithful had very limited access to sacraments, religious instruction, spiritual guidance, leading to an erosion of consistent religious practice. King John IV of Portugal, recognizing this dire situation, tried to remedy it by inducing the Pope to nominate a native priest, Andrew Gomez, as Vicar Apostolic of Canara.
A local leader.
Yes, a significant and pragmatic move. It reflected a local Raja's objection to European bishops, an attempt to foster more locally accepted leadership, and provide pastoral care where direct Portuguese control was weakening.
It sounds like a period of immense challenge, a real test of faith for a community just starting to establish itself. Were there any figures who stood out during this time of scattered efforts?
Yes. Despite the overall decline, remarkable individuals did emerge. Figures like Father Joseph Voss, famously known as the Apostle of Ceylon, played a crucial role. He revisited Canara, his old field of labor, for 9 months on his way to Ceylon, where he later achieved incredible success. His periodic presence, even if brief, shows ongoing, albeit scattered, efforts to provide spiritual succor and continuity. These individuals often operated with immense personal courage, traveling through dangerous territories to minister to isolated congregations.
It seems like internal disputes also started to surface during this period, especially concerning the very practical matter of church property and land. When external support wanes, sometimes internal vulnerabilities come to the fore.
Indeed, and a significant illuminating example is the Wembley freehold rent land dispute near Mulugger's Church. This wasn't minor. It became a long-running saga. It illustrates early challenges in defining church property versus private property and asserting community rights. Bishop Thomas de Castro, an early vicar apostolic active from 1677 to 1700, had obtained this valuable land from the Queen of Connaught. Good acquisition. But then, after his death, the land became a bone of contention. His nephew, a Father A. Pinto, controversially claimed it as his private property. This led to a protracted legal battle with the congregation. It wasn't easily settled. It escalated, eventually going all the way up to Archbishop Tavera of Goa. It even involved the British East India Company due to their growing jurisdiction and influence. The legal complexities were immense, dragging on for decades.
Really highlights the lack of clear frameworks back then.
Absolutely, especially for church property in a colonial context, and the potential for abuse when leadership changed. This drawn-out affair was finally settled only in 1830, when the church successfully regained control after a suit against Pinto's relatives was decided in its favor, over a century of dispute.
Wow. So by the late 18th century, a struggling but persistent Christian community in Canara had weathered external political shifts, internal legal battles. But then, a new, far more formidable and devastating threat loomed. 4. The Tiger's Shadow. Persecution under Tippu Sultan, late 1700s. We now turn to what our sources describe as the darkest period for Canara Christians. The catastrophic reign of Tippu Sultan, the Tiger of Mysore. What precipitated this devastating era? Why were Christians specifically targeted?
Well, the groundwork for this tragic chapter was actually laid, perhaps unintentionally, by Tipu's father, Hyder Ali. Initially, Hyder Ali had treated Christians with relative kindness and tolerance, but a turning point came after the English took the Mangalore fort in 1768. Hyder Ali began to suspect Christian complicity with his enemies, even though the community largely managed to prove their innocence.
But the suspicion remained.
The suspicion remained. Hyder issued a tense injunction. If Europeans came by sea again, Christians were to either go to Bednor, an interior city, or settle there and pay tribute. This set a dangerous precedent. Tipu Sultan, who succeeded Hyder in 1782, was a stark contrast. He's described in the source as a fanatical and bigoted follower of the prophet, much less liberal than his father. His primary motive for the persecution was deep, unwavering suspicion of Christian loyalty, fearing they'd consistently side with his British and other enemies. His resolve was chillingly clear. He intended to make them all Mohammedans, a radical, terrifying objective.
The source also adds that profound, almost theological layer to Tipu's actions, suggesting a divine hand. This feels like a very period-specific interpretation.
It is, and it's a very interesting interpretive point made by the author of this history, reflecting a specific theological worldview. The author suggests the Christians themselves had, through their bad lives and moral failings, provoked the chastisement of God, and that Tipu was simply the scourge he used against them to bring them back to righteousness.
Divine punishment.
That's the framing. It's noted that Father Miranda, a revered figure, had even prophetically warned of the coming captivity due to prevailing vices. The author further notes this scourge discriminated, heavier where sin was perceived greater, lighter where lives were comparatively blameless. This adds a profound theological, almost providential dimension. It frames the persecution not just as political tyranny, but as a spiritual test. For the community enduring it, such an interpretation might have offered a framework for understanding unimaginable suffering, perhaps a pathway for repentance amidst the horror. It's a striking example of faith intertwining with historical interpretation.
This wasn't just a threat, though. It was a systematic, terrifying action. How did this mass deportation actually happen?
Chillingly methodical, shockingly comprehensive. On Ash Wednesday, February 24, 1784, Tipu issued secret, sealed orders to officers across the country. The orders were explicit and ruthless. Seize all Padres and Calistafes Christians, assemble them, and immediately sequestrate all their property, grain, cattle, land, plantations for the government. Their lands were then given to other ryots, farmers, with a clear instruction that officers would be held accountable if the lands weren't cultivated.
Total dispossession.
Total dispossession and removal. Any future Christian settlers were to be similarly seized. This wasn't spontaneous. It was a centrally planned purge. About 21 priests were apprehended and sent out of the country, cruelly separated from their flocks, leaving them leaderless. The source points out a striking resemblance to Charles III of Spain's mass exile of 5,000 Jesuits in 1767, suggesting Tipu might have deliberately followed a Spanish model.
And an old Canarese manuscript provides a harrowing eyewitness account of the deportation itself, the agony of a people. Can you describe some of the brutal details?
It offers a truly visceral, unforgettable account. It states around 20,000 people from just two tulics were arrested, gathered, held for days, probably without adequate provisions, then forced to ascend the steep Nagurgat, a challenging mountain pass, and march all the way to Seringapatam, Tipu's capital.
A forced march.
A brutal forced march, traveling at an agonizingly slow 2 leagues a day. Laborers got rations, botha, but farmers, a large portion, did not, leading to immense difficulty finding food. The graphic details are heart-wrenching. Pregnant women giving birth on the road, newborns carried precariously in bundles, the dead often buried on the spot, sometimes in shallow, hand-scooped graves, or even thrown into trenches or wells, clothes stolen. The account notes meals cooked even with dead bodies in the house, a stark violation of custom, showing sheer desperation.
Unimaginable conditions.
Unimaginable. Upon arriving near Seringapatam, they were housed in cramped tents, up to 100 persons per tent. The total gathered was estimated at a staggering 80,000 souls. Within just a month, devastating diseases, smallpox, dysentery, fever, cholera broke out, killing at least 1/3 of them. The misery was indescribable. Family members dying without others knowing, or too weak to bury them properly, corpses preyed upon by dogs and jackals. A calculated act of terror.
Beyond the horrific physical suffering, it sounds like there was a deliberate spiritual assault aimed at erasing their identity.
Absolutely. Tipu's ultimate aim was explicit: convert them en masse to Islam. Young men were forcibly chosen for his army, and in batches of 25, compelled to undergo circumcision, a profoundly violating act. Approximately 200 young and robust girls were selected for the Sultan's harem, stripped of autonomy and religious identity. Qazis, Islamic judges, taught them the Kalam and the Islamic creed, and they were forced into Muslim worship in mosques every Friday.
Was there any resistance?
Even in this extremity, yes. Some young men bravely defied the harem selections, smashing palanquins in protest. They were brutally beaten with shoes, whips, clubs. Many died. Leaders like Jemidars had noses and ears slit, paraded on asses as public humiliation, a clear message. One man, Mobley Anthony, famously defied the Sultan to his face before dying, appealing to God, becoming a martyr in memory. Interestingly, the Sultan, advised by his chief Qazi, later punished those who calumniated Christians, even banishing them. A bizarre, perhaps pragmatic shift.
And how did the community cope spiritually?
Many Christians, perhaps accepting that theological interpretation we discussed, believed their tribulation stemmed from neglecting God's law. They began reading Puranas and performing religious duties in secret, sometimes in hidden refuges. This led to destruction of their books and forced mixing with other communities if discovered. There's also that remarkable act of self-sacrifice. Manuel Mendez, a Christian attendant, donned the Sultan's apparel, took his place in the royal palanquin, allowing Tipu to escape capture during one expedition. Mendez was cut into 3 pieces by enemy soldiers, a profound act of loyalty, showing the complex personal allegiances even then.
This sounds like an almost complete wipeout, but what did others like Abbé Dubois say about the Christian response? Was there a collective response?
Abbé Dubois, a French missionary visiting Mysore in 1801, provided a very controversial and harsh account in his letters on the state of Christianity in India. He described the apostasy as unexampled in the annals of Christianity. He claimed the whole apostatized en masse and without resistance or protestation tamely underwent the operation of circumcision.
A very sweeping judgment.
Extremely sweeping. He believed they lacked practical faith, were poorly equipped for martyrdom, and even feared future tame submission. It's a very severe assessment, perhaps influenced by his own expectations.
But the editor of our source material offers a more nuanced counterpoint, providing context.
Precisely. The editor notes Dubois goes a little too far and is too sweeping. They argue it's not to be wondered at if they were found wanting, given their previous spiritual destitution. Remember that long period without enough priests or sacraments. That lack of robust spiritual infrastructure likely weakened their preparedness for such an extreme trial. The source also cites Father Pesero's account from Sankari, showing a more complex reality. While some yielded, others valiantly resisted. Many fled or remained hidden, enduring hardship. Ultimately, many fell into spiritual ignorance not from conscious rejection, but due to the prolonged, forced lack of sacraments and instruction. This offers a more compassionate, historically informed perspective. It acknowledges the immense pressure, the erosion of faith possible when a community is deprived of spiritual support and subjected to systematic violence. A powerful lesson in understanding faith under duress.
A truly dark chapter indeed. But how did this community, almost annihilated, begin to recover and rebuild from such profound devastation? 5. Rising from the ashes. Return and rebuilding, early 1800s. After 15 harrowing years, the captivity finally ended with the fall of Tippu Sultan in 1799, defeated by the British. What happened to the survivors? How did they begin to find their way back?
Well, many Christians, driven by desperation and longing for home, have been attempting to escape throughout the captivity, especially towards Coorg, where Rajadadavira was friendly to them and an enemy of Tipu. After Tipu's fall, large numbers did indeed return, undertaking arduous journeys back to Kanara. However, the total population had been drastically reduced, estimated at only 15,000 for Kanara, a mere fraction of what it had been.
And their property. That must have been a huge issue.
A major, immediate challenge. While some lands had been sold voluntarily, maybe under duress, others were left for safekeeping or simply seized by Tipu's headmen. The British collector, a Mr. Reed, issued proposals for restoration, though the source suggests they weren't fully carried out. Bureaucratic hurdles, perhaps. Nevertheless, a Mr. Conjetan Coelho emerged as a key figure, instrumental in restoring a good amount of property. His efforts were so significant he earned a high honor, a palanquin with 8 bearers, a real mark of esteem back then. It's also important to note not all Christians were carried away. Some tenants of native Rajas and Hindu landlords were spared, highlighting varied experiences even within the persecution.
The reconstruction of community life, rebuilding churches, that must have been an absolutely Herculean task, given the scale of destruction. How did they even begin?
An immense undertaking. Incredible resilience needed. Many churches were entirely destroyed or desecrated. The source lists no less than 27 churches entirely destroyed, including the significant Rosario, Milagres, and Bowler churches in Mangalore. To add insult to injury, stones from Milagres Church were even used by Tipu's forces to build a Mohammedan place of prayer on Edia Hill, a deliberate symbol of erasure.
But the spirit to rebuild was there.
It was strong, fueled by faith and that innate desire for community. In Mangalore, there's a fascinating anecdote about a mystical warning. A Mr. Gonsalves, prominent community member, planned to combine 2 former parishes into one large church. Efficient, perhaps, but he received a warning in mystic language, cautioning against making of many things one. Taking heed, he induced the people to apply for 2 separate churches, Rosario and Milagres rebuilt by their respective parishioners, stopping work on the single construction.
Wow. A mix of spiritual belief and community initiative.
Exactly. And families like Coelho, Saldana, Pinto, Norona, Pais, Gonsalves, Mascarenas, Vaz were truly pillars of this rebuilding, contributing vital funds, stones, timber, iron from their own resources, a remarkable collective effort. By 1821, they successfully petitioned the British for tax remission on church lands, reflecting growing British support. And this resilience paid off dramatically. The Christian population grew significantly from 21,820 in North and South Canara in 1818 to a robust 78,805 in South Canara alone by 1900. A stunning recovery.
This period also saw the Sankari mission near Karwar trying to revive. It sounds like that was particularly difficult given the spiritual impact of the persecution.
Yes, Sankari mission, tied to English trading factories, was also mercilessly devastated. Father Francis Xavier Pisetto, a Carmelite witnessing the return of captives in 1801, provided a stark description of the profound spiritual forgetfulness. He noted many were like beasts of the field in their ignorance of faith due to the prolonged lack of sacraments and instruction. Imagine 15 years without priests, mass, spiritual practices. It led to a deep erosion of faith knowledge.
More than just physical suffering, a spiritual void.
Absolutely. It illustrates the deep impact beyond physical loss, a spiritual void needing painstaking refilling. Despite such challenges, the mission was gradually restored, often with direct assistance from the English, providing grants of land for churches. It was a slow, arduous process, physical reconstruction and spiritual re-evangelization. 6. Navigating the storm. The Goanese schism and shifting jurisdictions, mid-1800s.
Okay, so just as the community was painstakingly rebuilding, finding its footing after Tippu Sultan's reign, a new kind of internal strife emerged, the Goanese schism. What was this all about? Why was it so divisive? It fractured communities that had just endured so much together.
Well, this was an incredibly complex, centuries-long conflict stemming from the Padroado system. This unique system, essentially a patronage arrangement, granted the King of Portugal vast rights over Catholic missions in India, including appointing bishops, controlling revenues, defining territories, huge power. The Holy See, the Vatican, later came to deeply regret these concessions, recognizing how problematic they became as the Church sought to expand globally.
And the immediate trigger in the 19th century.
Political turmoil in Portugal itself. Rival political parties led to disputed ecclesiastical appointments. In 1835, an Archbishop Carvalho, supported by the Portuguese government, but not necessarily universally recognized by the Pope, was acknowledged by the Goa chapter, the local authority.
So how did this internal Portuguese dispute spill over and create such a profound religious divide way over in Canada? Sounds incredibly complex for the local faithful.
It was a colossal headache for them. The Christians of Canada initially acknowledged Carvalho, trying to maintain continuity. However, they were soon informed by the Vicar Apostolic of Bombay, a different jurisdiction, directly accountable to Rome about the illegality of his election from the Vatican's perspective. Upon receiving this, they collectively withdrew allegiance, even compelling initially unwilling priests in Mangalore to follow suit. This created great confusion and excitement. They sought guidance.
And the advice?
Submit to the nearest Vicar Apostolic, a Pope-appointed representative, until the Holy See could resolve it definitively. Consequently, many Christians in Canada decided to place themselves under Monsignor Francis Xavier, the Vicar Apostolic of Verapoli, a neighboring Roman-appointed jurisdiction. But this decision was far from universal. Parishes like Rosario and Milagres in Mangalore transferred allegiance. Others, in whole or part, clung to Goa. Sides were taken. Schism, the term used for these deep disturbances, was established all through Canada, not just theological but practical impacts on sacraments, property, authority.
So churches within miles of each other, even in the same city, might have been on different sides. That must have created immense practical and emotional strain, especially after everything they just endured.
Precisely. A deep, painful division fracturing communities, impacting baptisms, marriages, property management, everything. The Vatican tried to resolve it with a papal bull Multiple Clare in 1838. It aimed to simplify things, effectively abolishing some Portuguese sees, uniting them with new vicariates apostolic under direct Roman authority. But instead of resolving it, this decree led to a furious outbreak from Portuguese clergy and loyalists. They audaciously asserted the bull was fabricated by the vicars apostolic themselves. Shows the intense emotions, traditions, political undercurrents.
So efforts to fix it made it worse initially.
In some ways, yes. Bishop Louis Martini, coadjutor to the Vicar Apostolic of Verapoli, was sent to quell the schism in Canara in 1844. He took a strong stance, excommunicating Pedroto defenders. He was in turn excommunicated by Goa loyal clergy. This led to direct, tense confrontations, like when he tried to take possession of the church of Pichar. Real physical manifestations of this jurisdictional battle. Painful and confusing for the faithful caught in the middle.
It sounds like a protracted, bitter conflict, undermining the unity needed for recovery. How is this long-standing Goanese schism finally resolved?
Gradually. Through a series of new Concordat diplomatic agreements between the Holy See and Portugal. The Concordat of 1886 was particularly significant for Canada. It largely ended the double jurisdiction that had plagued the region. As part of this intricate diplomatic dance, North Canara, with its 9 churches and about 10,500 Christians, was formally ceded to Goa's jurisdiction. In return, Mangalore received 11 Goanese churches in South Canara, finally ending concurrent, confusing jurisdictions within its immediate limits, clear lines of authority.
A clearer structure, finally.
Yes. Ultimately, in the grand establishment of the Indian hierarchy in 1886, Mangalore was assigned to the new province of Pondicherry, not Goa. This marked a definitive shift away from the long-standing Portuguese Pedroto influence in that specific region, a testament to persistent, high-level negotiation bringing unity after long division. 7. A new era. The Jesuit mission and institutional flourishing, late 1800s, early 1900s.
With the schism mostly resolved, a clearer structure in place, a truly transformative new chapter began for the Diocese of Mangalore, marked by the arrival of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. Why the Jesuits specifically? What was the driving force behind this significant change?
A primary reason, explicitly cited by the people of Mangalore themselves in their direct petition to the Holy See, was the urgent, pressing need for a Catholic college for youth education. The community had suffered immense setbacks. They recognized that to truly thrive, secure their future, they needed robust educational institutions. In response, the Jesuit mission in Mangalore was officially founded in 1878. Father Nicholas M. Pagani was appointed pro-vicar apostolic, signaling this new era, a strategic decision by Rome, bringing in an order renowned for intellectual rigor and educational prowess.
And this emphasis on education leads directly to one of their most significant initiatives, St. Aloysius College, a cornerstone of the new mission.
Yes, St. Aloysius College quickly became not just a cornerstone, but a powerful symbol of the new mission's commitment to education and social advancement. The first meeting for its founding was April 1879. A second meeting in July formulated detailed rules for founders, Rs. 1000, and benefactors, Rs. 500, a structured fundraising approach. Specific perpetual privileges attached free education for sons, annual masses typically descending in the male line by primogeniture, aimed to incentivize long-term support.
Did it work? Did they get support?
They did. Interestingly, significant donors included European nobility, like Mary Beatrice of Bourbon and the Count of Chambord. Shows the international reach of the effort. Total funds raised were substantial, including a large loan from Europe and a grant from the Madras government, a blend of local, European, and governmental support. Classes opened remarkably quickly, 1880, with 150 students, including a dozen Hindus. Shows immediate appeal, reaching beyond the Catholic community. He quickly added matriculation, affiliated with Madras University as second grade in 1882, raised to first grade 5 years later, reaching 300 students. Became a central pillar, shaping generations.
Beyond this flagship college, what other initiatives did the Jesuits undertake? It sounds like they weren't just focused on academics.
Not at all. The first years were described as unremitting toil, immense effort. They addressed various aspects of community life. Holistic needs. Father Urban Stein, for instance, established several sodalities lay religious organizations. Blessed Virgin Mary, Sacred Heart, St. Joseph for Tailors, Children of Mary for Girls, aimed to promote frequent sacraments, Christian virtue, fostering deeper spiritual engagement and community bonds across demographics.
And practical things, too, like the press.
Yes, another crucial initiative was the Codial Bale Press, founded in 1882 by Father Muti, developed a very successful career of usefulness, printing Catholic books, pamphlets in English, and vernaculars like Konkani, Canada. Vital for instruction, outreach. Importantly, it also provided much-needed employment in a town where industries were then limited to coffee curing, tile making, tangible social and economic impact.
And they also extended efforts significantly into social care, reaching the most vulnerable.
Absolutely. Their commitment to holistic care was evident, progressive for the time. 1883, a catechumenate opened at Jeppu for converts, later expanded, renamed St. Joseph's Asylum for the Sick and Poor. Explicitly open to the needy of every caste and creed, offering instruction or just relief.
That's quite inclusive.
Very inclusive for the time. Demonstrated charitable outreach beyond the Catholic community itself. Furthermore, orphanages for boys and girls, or refuge for poor widows, critical social safety nets. Significantly, a leper asylum added in 1885, caring for the most marginalized, stigmatized, offering dignity, medical care, illustrates that holistic approach far beyond traditional church activities.
This period also saw significant leadership changes and key moments of challenge and celebration. One particular legal battle stands out.
Indeed. Bishop Nicholas Pagani, first Bishop of Mangalore, consecrated 1885. Highly esteemed, saintly man, known for prayer, patience, but his tenure wasn't serene. Faced persistent legal battles, dragged from tribunal to tribunal, defending church interests. A direct consequence of the ongoing, deeply contentious Kaliampur-Milagres church legal battles, lasted 1887 to 1895, reached High Court of Madras, a pivotal case.
What was the core issue there?
Local parishioners contested the transfer of jurisdiction from Padroado, Portuguese, to Propaganda, Roman, saw it as infringing local rights traditions. Plaintiffs, claiming to represent parishioners, argued the church and property belonged to them as an endowment by ancestors. Resisted transfer, claiming congregational ownership, a landmark battle over the nature of church property and authority.
And the outcome.
The court ultimately ruled the church was trust property for Roman Catholic worship, not private or congregational property. Crucially, since the plaintiffs had denied communion with Rome by clinging to Goa or claiming to be Syrian Christians, they had ceased to be the parishioners in the court's eyes. Lost rights to property or management. Pivotal decision. Affirmed bishop's authority, clarified nature of church property within the new hierarchy. Crucial legal precedent.
Beyond Bishop Pagani, other notable leaders during this era?
Certainly. Before him, Bishop Michael resigned 1870, known for vast education initiatives, setting up convent schools for girls, early commitment to female education. His successor, Bishop Mary Ephraim, tenure sadly short, died 1873, focused on peace and unity, vital after the schism. And Father Alexander Dubois, vicar of Milagres, truly revered figure locally, known for virtue, generosity, even built a church at Cordell from his own personal funds. His tomb later became a site of popular veneration. People flocked for petitions, offerings, powerful testament to his impact.
Sounds like a time of deep spiritual and communal connection. Were there also significant public celebrations marking this era of renewed growth?
Yes, several moments of grand public celebration rallied the community, showcased renewed vitality. The Golden Jubilee of Pope Leo XIII priesthood in 1887 celebrated with grand displays of Catholic enthusiasm. Impressive torchlight processions through city streets. Must have been magnificent. Later, his Pontifical Silver Jubilee in 1903 saw widespread solemn services, celebrations, strong ties to the wider church. Another significant spiritual event, solemn translation of relics of Saint Gratian, Roman martyr, to the seminary church at Tipu in 1903. These public displays embedded the church deeply into Mangalore's social fabric, demonstrated renewed vitality, growing numbers, widespread acceptance. 8. Life in the diocese, community and growth, early 1900s.
As we approach the turn of the 20th century, move into its early years, what does the picture of the diocese look like? Under this new Jesuit leadership, robust rebuilding, sounds like a thriving hub.
Indeed, truly a period of significant growth and consolidation. Under Bishop Cavadini took charge 1896, Catholic population grew remarkably, from 79,454 to 89,372 by mid-1903. Increase of about 1,500 people a year, primarily due to a healthy birth rate, about two-thirds higher than death rate, stable expanded community, but also a steady stream of about 300 conversions annually. Continued draw through missionary efforts, social work.
And spiritually, not just numbers.
No, beyond sheer numbers, a remarkable increase in spiritual engagement. The statistics are telling. Confessions neared 300,000 yearly. Communions reached 400,000, nearly double just 7 years prior. Shows profound deepening of faith participation. A true spiritual renaissance after decades of tribulation, schism. Number of priests, regular and secular, also increased substantially, 66 to 88. Nuns from 90 to 137. Reflects expanded infrastructure, commitment to pastoral care, social service.
So it wasn't just building churches and colleges, it was building a complete social and spiritual support system, reaching the vulnerable, becoming integral to community welfare.
Exactly. Holistic care was evident, multifaceted. January 1898, Sisters of Charity introduced, given charge of orphanages, asylums at Jepu, centralizing, professionalizing care. Institutions at Kanganeri, linked to a homeopathic poor dispensary, opened 1891 under Father Muller, expanded significantly, added a fine hospital, memorial to late Bishop Pagani, and a refuge for the poor. Wide range of medical social services. When devastating bubonic plague hit Mangalore 1902, church responded immediately, added well-appointed plague hospital, rapid practical response to health needs.
Really shows the church becoming indispensable infrastructure.
Yes, providing essential services beyond purely spiritual ones. Earned deep respect, integration within the broader community.
This period also saw formalization of lay organizations, enabling broader participation, fostering self-reliance, key to resilience from within.
Yes, a key innovative development strengthening the community from the ground up. The Ursulines, founded 1887. Significant lay religious organization for single women. Innovative approach. Lead structured religious life at home, not traditional convent, might not suit all. Focus. Teaching Christian doctrine, church decoration, visiting poor and sick. Effectively extended church's outreach via dedicated lay efforts. Allowed women significant role.
And financial self-reliance, too.
Yes, another critical initiative. The Catholic Provident Fund, established 1887, Pope Leo XIII's Jubilee. Essentially neutral aid, insurance. Provide financial support for families of deceased members. Started modest, Rs 5,634 first year, grew robustly, over Rs 86,000 by 1903, dispersed over Rs 200,000 in bonuses over that period. Points to strong internal community support, shared responsibility, remarkable financial self-reliance within Mangalore's Catholic community.
This deep dive has truly revealed not just a history of the church, but a profound, inspiring story of a community's struggle, resilience, and transformation in a dynamic, often challenging region. Outro. From uncertain beginnings marked by a mysterious cross, to devastating persecution that nearly erased them, and a powerful resurgence driven by education, healthcare, charity. The history of Christianity in Canara is a remarkable testament to unwavering faith, astonishing perseverance, and an unbreakable community spirit. It's a story of survival, adaptation, profound growth against overwhelming odds.
What we've seen is how external pressures changing empires like Portuguese, Mysore, internal church politics like the Padroado Schism profoundly shaped the local experience. Yet through it all, the core identity, spiritual commitment of the faithful remained, adapting, evolving. The stories of individual sacrifices, complex legal battles defining rights, the sheer collective will for rebuilding truly bring this multifaceted history to life, demonstrating the enduring power of a community united by faith and common purpose.
This deep dive has shown us how a community, against all odds, not only survived, but thrived, adapting, innovating in response to profound challenges. It truly makes you wonder, what other stories of resilience, profound human spirit, are waiting to be unearthed in history's less traveled paths? And maybe more profoundly, well, what lessons can we learn about perseverance, communal solidarity, the human capacity for hope and renewal from such powerful narratives, especially when communities are pushed to their absolute limits?
A truly thought-provoking question, one that resonates far beyond the specifics of this historical account. The sources we've explored today provide a compelling example of how historical records, even seemingly dry ones, can reveal the extraordinary human and spiritual endurance of a people, offering timeless insights into the human capacity for hope, resilience, renewal in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this exploration has given you a fresh perspective and perhaps even inspired you to dig a little deeper into the rich tapestry of history around you. For there are countless lessons waiting to be discovered.